Welcome everyone to this week's Mic Check. Today we are focusing in on narration. So one of the main reasons I really wanted to do this script and I really wanted to focus in on narration is because there's one key aspect to narration that applies to pretty much every single other aspect of voiceover. And that is your goal of bringing your listener into your world, whether you're doing character work, whether you're doing commercial work, whether even you're doing or whether you're doing even something like industrial narration or product walkarounds, things like that. The whole purpose of your read is to bring your listener into what's going on, to help them see the world and be part of that. And narration sort of distills that to its purest, most basic form. So that's what we're doing today. And without any further ado, we're actually having one of our somebody who's joining us for the first time read for us. So Mondo, whenever you're ready, go for it.
All right. You just want me to start reading them? All right, excellent.
Yeah, go for it.
In Osterling, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town, and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, now you get to choose anybody else in the group to go next.
All right, now let's see who's under me. Kyle, it's your turn.
All right. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side valley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, you get to choose who goes next.
All right. Russ.
You muted, Russ. You pulled a Richard.
I knew that. No, that sounded good, Kyle. In Osterlink, you're welcome. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quick averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out." Michael.
In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out." Rob.
Is there any direction for the copy?
Yes, there is. Nathan, if you'd be so kind. Well, don't worry about the direction right now. Just go ahead and give us a read.
Okay, no problem. In Ostlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson. In Ostlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson. Oh, yeah. Hut, yeah. Pick up. In Ostlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hut trying, oh my gosh, tying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much time to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
All right, who's going next?
Hatim?
Alrighty. Should I try to do the direction or not?
It's up to you. This is a cold read for right now. So this is just about getting through the script rather than any particular style of read.
All right. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again. Okay, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning her over. Her caution. Oh man. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
All right. And last but not least, Nathan, you are up.
Okay. In Austenlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from the side alley. Unlike the rest, It seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out." And I'm not last because Jake just entered the room.
Jake.
There he is.
Congratulations, Jake. You arrived just in time to be our last reader again.
Let me grab that.
Of course I did.
your
Just in
timing
time
truly,
to really cold read this.
truly is impeccable. And that's okay. It's supposed to be a cold read.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
That's okay. You're just getting the full experience.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Coming off of what I narrated, this is great.
We gotta get it pulled up here.
No worries. Dive on into it whenever you.
In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeballing. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, so that is now officially everybody who's on here is read, right? All right, cool. So if anybody else comes in, they'll take your place as last in line, Jake. Don't worry.
Fair enough.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this. What kind of script or how is this going to be used? Is this audio only or audio visual?
Well, seeing in the directions that it mentions a game, I'm thinking audio visual. Yet it could be audio only. I mean, it is narration, so I mean, it's kind of flexible in that way. But
Okay, so
I see
you're
there-
thinking specifically audio visual.
there's a lot of descriptive imagery in there. That gives it the more audio side to it. So
Okay, anybody else have a guess?
I do agree with just reading through the direction. It does seem players are directed to the town of Osterlink. The only shot I see of this being audio only is if the players are, if this is something like a hybrid tabletop.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is going to be a visual.
Audio visual.
Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else? Agree, disagree, anything?
I mean,
I agree. It seems like it'd be pretty hard to do this without visuals, for the same reason everyone else has already spoken about.
I mean, if it's a video game, I'm thinking of something along the lines of Bastion or Transistor.
Okay. Okay. So a super giant game.
Yeah.
This is audio only.
Oh,
Is this like Skyrim Legendary Alexa Edition?
Something like that. You can think of this performance as sort of an enhanced RPG, enhanced tabletop RPG.
Okay.
So this is specifically audio only. You are essentially an audiobook narrator in this one. So it is particularly incumbent on you to try to communicate the general feel and the idea. That's specifically why the directions are just as fat and meaty as they are, is because, again, you are, your ultimate goal is to get your listener invested in the world that you're trying to build. So you have to build it out. Now, that's going to take a couple of things from you. Let's go ahead and talk about some technique here. If we're going for an audio only read, so that means some things. Sorry, excuse me. The difference between audio only and audio visual is mostly in the way that you use your mic. It's mostly in mic technique, because with audio visual, you actually have something on screen that you're trying to indicate. You're trying to get people to pay attention to what's happening on screen. You are playing co-host to the, or not co-host, but you're playing co-star to the images. And in fact, you actually want the images to be more of the star than you are. So normally with audio visual, any kind of audio visual script, unless it's very specific situations, you actually have to bring your volume down a little bit. So you're mostly at 70% volume, not 100%. You are trying to use your you're trying to keep in mind what's happening on screen and direct people to that. There's generally directions that will point you there to the to what's going on screen. With audio only, though, you can be more front and center, and that also counts with cartoon and video game animation. So audio only, or cartoon and video game narration, excuse me, you are 100% the center of attention. So you need to bring people into that world, bring people into what's going on. So that's going to be the main difference here, is that it's entirely on you to paint in your listener's mind what's happening, the nuances, the changes, the scenes, everything like that. You need to have a clear idea of what you want your listener to feel so you can communicate that specifically. So now let's go ahead and talk about that feel, that particular thing that we need to bring people into. So what can you gather about the world so far just from this script? What do you understand about the world based on the direction and what's written? Let's go ahead and come up with a few 1 or 2 word descriptions of the general feel for it. And if you have a piece of paper nearby, or if you can open up Notepad or something like that, somewhere to take some notes as to what we're thinking, that will be extremely helpful.
There's a large amount of mystery and gravitas.
Okay.
And I mean, there's also a lot of fear involved, because I mean, people are just kind of not wanting to look you eye to eye.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, very extremely wary of strangers.
I would say Lovecraftian.
Okay, that's okay. Lovecraftian. So we got mystery, we've got gravitas. Rob put in the chat apocalypse. We've got Lovecraftian. What else is there?
Very cold.
Go on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was gonna say it seems very cold to me, because
Cold. Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, it seems like everyone in this short bit is being not exactly the most friendly towards the player.
I wonder what gave you that idea. Okay, so cold, that's a good one. Mondo, what are we going to say?
I was just going to say, it seems like everyone's kind of suspicious of people they're not already familiar with, because it seems like it's a pretty dangerous situation all these people are in. So
okay, suspicious.
More suspicious, or even maybe hostile towards outsiders.
Okay. Suspicious, hostile. Okay.
It gives you kind of an isolationist vibe, kind of
isolationist,
Silent Hill-ish.
Ooh, really going dark with this one.
Or Alan Wake.
Best Resident Evil. Anyway. So, all right, we've got, Alan Wake is another pretty good one. So one that I'll throw out there is dark. Seems like one that seems would fit. Anybody else? Just
The
want to make sure I've got
closest
all
thing
ideas
that-
coming in.
The closest thing that popped up in my mind is like what Jake said. Like it's like Bloodborne, Lovecraftian, that type of thing.
Bloodborne, such a good game.
You have
But
no
yes,
idea how happy
Lovecraftian
you just
dark.
made him.
I have both the video game and the board game, so yeah, I'm a little bit of a fan of Bloodborne. But those are all really good descriptive words. Let's find out exactly what we need to do to really communicate that. So now that we have this general idea of things suck, I'll just put all of that under the general umbrella of things suck. How can we really communicate when you think of this kind of narration? Think of things that you've heard in the past. Bloodborne's not very narration heavy, and its story is more told through context and contextual clues rather than an actual like storytelling. But some of the other Souls games do the same thing. Let's see. I know that there was one, Sinking City, I think is what it's called. I can't remember what the video game is, but it's very Lovecraftian, and it's based off of, I think it's Shadow over Innsmouth. When you think of those kinds of narrations, how would you describe the sounds and the techniques that the person is using? What are some things that come to mind?
I'd say a lot of narration and stuff like that kind of gives a foreboding tone. Like, just kind of tells you, hey, something bad is going to happen here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got foreboding. That's one of the sounds that we want to go for.
He's
Okay,
using kind of a hushed tone, not
hushed. There we go.
whisper,
That's
but
what
a
I was
hushed
gonna say.
tone.
So now we're starting to talk technique here, which is what I was going
Yeah.
for. So
I did a
so
Bigfoot
hushed.
narration that was very similar to this, and that's what I had to do. So,
Okay.
This kind of I mean it almost makes me think it would have like you would put on like a sort of a bite to your voice.
A bite.
yeah,
Like a harshness to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
Like a
too
like a
harsh,
Vincent
though.
Price kind
Okay.
of bite, or
Yeah, I mean, if you add
Okay.
too much of a harshness to something like this, it's going to come off a more documentary style narration than it is the style of narration that it is.
Well,
I mean, it's kind of a fine line to adding the bite to it.
I agree, but I bring up Vincent Price because you think about
Yeah.
when you would listen to old recordings of him. Yes, Michael, I'm aware I'm dating myself again,
No, that's fantastic. I
but
agree.
his was more. It was more sinister than
Yeah.
documentarian.
Yeah,
And I think if that's more what Kyle was going for, I would definitely agree.
I see what you mean.
Depending on what role you as the narrator might play as storyteller, if you know a little more than you're letting on, I absolutely think that would work.
Yeah, yeah. If you're fully off that Vincent Price style, then yeah, definitely, because he was a master at that sort of thing.
okay. I am going to kind of disagree with that style specifically for this, for only one reason. It's probably a little too harsh for a long-term narration. Because if we're thinking about, Vincent Price did amazing work with what, with what was hired to do, that he filled in a particular niche. It wasn't too long and it wasn't too short. This is long-term narration. Something like this is going to be a very long project. And if you cannot maintain that kind of performance throughout the entire thing, you're going to have noticeable drops and changes in quality. And it'd probably stick out more than, it would with a shorter style of narration. So I would pose this should be approached a little bit more like an audiobook, slightly slower. Make sure that people can understand what's going on and feel what you're trying to say. But unlike an audiobook, you really want to do a lot more modulation in your voice, because even just the slight tone shifts and changes at certain points can really go a long way to communicating what you're trying to say and helping to establish that same vibe. So in that sense, when it comes to trying to be part of the world, let's go ahead and talk about the character that this narrator is. obviously this person knows what's going on in a general sense, or at least they see what's going on in a general sense. But who does this person sound like to you? Are they a part of the party? Are they just following along with the party? Are they writing this after the fact? Like, how involved in the story is this person based on what you read here? Because regardless of what you may think, the narrator is a character. The narrator is always a character and has character traits.
I said it in chat, but I'll say again, this is Matthew Mercer. This is the DM.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. It definitely does give off a kind of tabletop DM narration feel.
Okay. So then what are some key things about that? What makes a tabletop DM narrator?
See, they definitely know what's going on.
Okay. So they have some insight.
They've got insight. I guess from the standpoint of their characterization with relation to the players, since according to the direction there are players, they care about the players' well-being, but they're also not going to make it easy.
Okay. So maybe a little sinister.
Good way to put it.
I don't even know that I would say sinister. I mean, they're a game master. That they're playing it close to the chest.
Okay.
They know a little bit about what's coming, but they're going to let you experience it rather than spoil the fun.
Okay. So once again, we'll direct back to what Mondo said. They have insight as to what's going to happen. Okay. So when it comes to a storytelling style read, and this is going to be the last bit of the discussion portion, because I think we have a good idea of the kind of feel that we want and the kind of techniques that we can use or things that we can include in our narration. But the last little bit I want to bring up is when it comes to a storytelling style of read, when you think of somebody who tells stories really well, what makes that read? What makes that pop? What is a good storyteller sound like? Or what does a good storyteller sound like? Excuse me. I'll start. Why not? I think a good storyteller feels and communicates some of the same things that their listener is feeling. So, for instance, second sentence on, the few villagers you see scurrying on their way only regard you with cautious stares. I think at that point, the players would kind of feel curious. Why are they, what are they being scared about? I think a good storyteller would have some of that in their voice. Something like, the few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. Like, well, what's this all about? It has that. I'm trying to communicate that as best I can, but again, actually, it's really typified in that last sentence of that first paragraph. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You're kind of emotionally invested along with the players, with whoever's in the world, and that helps communicate that story. So I think some personal emotional investment into what's going on is going to go a long way to helping you out with that read. Does anybody else have any other things that they might have noticed or that they want to say in regards to a storytelling style of read?
You mentioned this earlier, but I think pacing is very important. It's very easy. It's very easy to get yourself into a rhythm as an audiobook narrator, and the next thing you know, every sentence has the same melody, the same rhythm, the exact same pace, and it's like audio morphine. It's just going to put listeners to sleep. So I think one of the things you have to do is you have to treat it as though, even though you have insight, some of what you are reading is fresh for you as well.
Okay. Well, my wife was overhearing the question that I posed, and she actually has some insight. I don't know. Why not, right? Be a little bit of an outsider perspective. So why don't you go ahead and share with us a little bit what you were thinking? They can hear you fine right there.
Oh, okay. Well, he has the headphones, so I won't be able to hear you. But according and to answer the question that he asked, I was thinking atmosphere setting, because as the narrator, not only do you know, especially if it's third person, not only do you know the thoughts and the actions that is going on for each character, you're also setting the tone for everything. So if it's unsettling, if it's nerve-wracking, you have to portray that in your voice, in the way that you communicate everything. If it's really exciting and joyful, you have to communicate that. Otherwise, why you would just listen to text to speech.
Okay, so a non-voice actor's view on that particular question.
Hence
So-
the reason AI will never take over for us.
Exactly. So there's a lot of information. I hope you guys took any notes. Before we get back into the directed read, are there any specifics about the script or about what we've talked about that you'd like to review a little bit? Anything you may still have questions on?
One of my questions would be, knowing that it is Elizabethan, European, to what degree, I don't know which one of you pulled this script, but to what degree did they request any kind of an accent or affectation?
There was no accent or affectation
Okay.
requested, but if you, and this is really key, if you are going to use one, which you can,
Got to be
make
good.
sure that you can carry it through the entire thing.
Right.
Yes, it has to come off as natural. Many times when I see like directions, or not directions, but many times when I see specs looking for specific accents, they will always ask for native speakers, specifically because if you're not, it's apparent. It's very apparent. Unless you can absolutely fool native, probably best to avoid it. But that doesn't mean you can't do a little bit of something with it. If you give yourself a slight little change in things here or there, some audiobook narrators will do that when they come across different characters, or well, yeah, mostly it happens with different characters. They'll do a slight change to their voice, but not something that's overly dramatic. I think it's more important to get yourself into the mind, to the headspace, rather than trying to sound specifically like what you're going after. So anyway, threw out a ton of information. Was there anything else? Okay. If nobody has any other questions or comments, let's go ahead and get into the directed reads, starting with Mondo. Whenever you're ready, go for it.
Wait 1 second, let me just get a drink. I'll be like 5 seconds. Out of water, that does not matter though. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call it a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think of that performance?
Mondo, I'm sure you're aware of this. You've got a great natural voice, but I think one of the things that I picked up on was you got into that very steady rhythm that didn't have as much of the insight into what's going on. It all read very, very similar from one line to the next. So I'd love to hear a little more inflection, maybe just a little bit more facial movement. So, a raised eyebrow here, just something that will create some inflection, some of that insight in your voice.
I think it sounded a bit like a newscaster, just telling a news story, sort of. But there were some parts that you got into it, especially at the beginning. It sounded like that.
Can I pitch in like a quick response to that?
Mm. Nope. That would be breaking the Dan rule.
All right, just making sure. Thanks.
The only reason is again, we just want you to focus in on just how you're reading, what you're doing specifically with the narration. I would agree. I thought that your affectation was a little bit flat throughout the entire time. There needed to be a little bit more modulation and personal importance to what's going on. So what I'd like to hear from your next read is to add more of that in, add more of, you looking around and seeing what's happening and being involved with what's happening. So go ahead and give us another read.
Right now? Okay. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call it a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think?
I think that was a lot better.
I think you did a really good job with the modulation. I heard it.
I agree. I thought you took the directions well. So you could definitely, you could hear that you yourself were more engaged, which is what's going to draw the players in and get them more engaged.
Yes.
I've got a question for you, actually. What is your experience in voiceover? Are you pretty fresh into it? Have you done some work? Like, I just want to get a grip of where you are, roughly.
Extremely fresh.
Okay.
Completely new at this. Like I got my mic like last Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I'm guessing that you haven't done anything that people have directed you on before.
Not at all.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because one of the fun things that you can look at to and try to pay attention to is what direction you get back fairly frequently. For me, I tend to go really fast. So many times I'll have to stop and retake some sections that I've just done because I've moved a little too quickly. I'm guessing you received a lot of compliments on the sound of your voice specifically, right?
Hello? Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, because and I'm going to point this out now because it's really early on and this is something you could work on. The reason I point that out is because I noticed that though you are also adding in some personal affection, affectation and adding in your own emotions at least a little bit more into these reads, you tend to really be leaning in on the sound of your voice. You're really trying to make your voice sound good. And it may not be necessarily conscious, but that's definitely what I'm getting. And what I mean by that is you're unintentionally adding, like, we call syrupiness or some syrup into the read itself. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson. You know, you're dragging out the ends of words and the like. And that usually happens, and I'm not the only one who will tell you that. Many coaches will as well. That usually happens when somebody is complimented on the sound of their voice over and over again. Sometimes when they get nervous, that's the main thing they lean on, is the sound that they have. When what I want to try to do with you is get you to focus in more on your mental space, on where your head is, and on what you're seeing. I want you to try to see what's happening here. I want you to use your hands, physicate a little bit more, point to what's going on. When you raise your hand in greeting, raise your hand in greeting. So focus more on your acting, focus more on what's happening around you, and tell us that. Go ahead and give us one more read.
Sure thing. All right. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley.
Okay,
The few
I'm
villagers-
gonna stop you real quick right there. You can continue afterwards. Slow it down. You're moving a little too quick. Slow it down.
Okay.
Look around at what's happening.
Okay. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call it a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
What did everybody think of that read?
Heard what you were talking about that time, Michael. The other thing that I'll mention that occurred to me is part of the sameness of parts of the read. Mondo, you're going to be told at some point, it's okay to add your own punctuation or ignore some of theirs if you're honoring the read. There are places, I can tell you just as an English teacher, this is well written but poorly punctuated. And if you honor their punctuation rather than honoring what they're trying to say with each sentence, it's going to come off a little stilted. And I think that may be part of what's happening. Things like you raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted. Like if you string that together where there really should be some punctuation to slow you down, it's going to sound a little odd. The same thing with where did I see it? It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into, like, there should be a definite pause there, even without a comma. That and needs a little stop, or at least a slow before it. So try and think in terms of what the sentences are supposed to be saying, rather than what the words on the page are. Does that make sense? The difference between the two?
Yes.
Okay.
Although I will say, I think when it comes to getting away from those previous reads, this one was your most realistic and down to earth. This one was your best read so far. I'm glad that you brought that up, and I wasn't going to. That was kind of the challenge for the script, Jake, was the punctuation. So the main thing that I noticed in the script is the punctuation is put in the dumbest places.
Happy to blow that up for you then.
Yes. So for instance, second sentence of the first paragraph, the few villagers you see, there's a comma right there when the comma should actually be after scurrying on their way. So it should be the few villagers you see scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. This is, now, I didn't add that in. I didn't change the script. This is directly from the original script. So yes, the punctuation is stupid. There we go. I have now blown the lid wide off of this particular script's main issue, is the punctuation is dumb. You're going to have to redo some of that to make it make more sense. So that's going to be moving commas into new areas. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way, comma, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. Let's see, where's the other one? You raise your hand. Yeah, you raise your arm to call it a friendly greeting time and time again, comma, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. For whatever reason, whoever wrote this script decided that the commas would be put in the least sensical way. I don't know, the least grammatically correct, least easy to read way. It's just the commas are a mess, and that's the main challenge of the script. So we're not going to belabor the point too much. We'll go ahead and move on because that last read was really, really solid. And I don't want to over direct you because with your first time here and not being super used to getting a whole lot of direction in, it may start moving into the overwhelming territory. But I will say that that second read was your most down-to-earth read, your most human and the easiest to listen to from a long-term standpoint. Sorry, third read. Thanks. Thanks for correcting me, Jake. But anyway, good job. Let's go ahead and move on. Kyle, you're up.
In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, but with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. Let's get some feedback going. What everybody think?
I feel like I always wind up being the first one to go. I liked it in terms of some of the acting choices. I liked it. The biggest thing that stood out to me was you kind of did it like a car. You started off slow and you sped up all the way through. So you kind of went 0 to 60 through it.
Yeah, there was a bit of
You need
ramping
to-
up there.
And you really you had a much better pace those first couple of sentences, and then you floored it the rest of the way through.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so go ahead and give us another read, except this time make sure to try to monitor your pace throughout the whole thing.
All right. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. How was that?
It still sounds a bit fast.
I was going to say it was more even, but it was. I agree with Nathan. It's still
Yeah.
still too fast. I think there, part of what it is you're not pausing between sentences. One of the things, because this is a narration, I feel like, a Pat Fraley lesson is certainly apropos. One of the things that Fraley talks about is when you talk, no one breathes so quickly to make sure that they keep their sentences together. You don't talk really quickly, and as you're going through, taking a quick breath, right? People don't do that. You slow it down, take the time to, regard you with cautious stares.
Yeah.
You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, because that's going to, the biggest thing is, remember, you're not just an audiobook. You're not just talking to someone that's listening, possibly at 1.5 speed while they're driving to school. Or work, sorry. But you, for me, but you have players. If this is a modified tabletop, you have players that have to get a feel for what's going on, and they have no idea what's going on in the world that their characters are getting ready to inhabit, except through you. So it's okay to take that time to really, like Michael's wife said, to establish that atmosphere, to draw it out a little bit.
Yeah. And also remember, this is a narration, not a commercial. So you have plenty of time to take your time with it.
And what I heard would probably come with what Jake said, slowing down, and what Nathan said was that you hit certain words pretty hard. So maybe once you slow down and take your time.
Okay. So I guess the general consensus is slow it down a little bit. Let's give that a try. So slow it down a little bit.
All right.
Even
Indicate
more,
what's
because
going on.
I do think you slowed it down some, but even more. Take your time.
Okay. Slow it down a little
All
bit
right.
more. Go for it from the top.
In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay. Opening it up. What did everybody think?
Done.
Yeah.
Give Kyle the gig. The rest of us can go home.
I love that
You
last
worked in the
line.
pacing nicely.
That last line is so cool. Just you give it as like the end is sold out. I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah, this is where we need the Fry from Futurama meme. Shut up and take my money.
Shut up and take my money.
So, Kyle, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the same questions I asked Mondo. What's your experience in voiceover?
I started like a month or two ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been doing
Okay, so
like
you're still fairly fresh.
yeah, I'm still fairly fresh. I've just been doing a bunch of like online stuff.
Okay. Okay.
Online stuff.
Have you gotten much direction and feedback on your reads?
No, this is my first experience with that.
Oh, okay. All right. So one thing to note is your speed. You definitely want to watch that. Your speed is not something that should be automatic. Speed is a tool, and it can really help change up your read from one thing to another. So that's definitely something to keep your mind on when you're reading next. But this one was really solid. You really, it felt like you were walking us through what was going on and you were in the world and part of it. So good job.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Russ, you're up. Go for it.
Am I on mute?
No, we can hear
Oh,
you this time.
Okay.
We
good.
can hear you.
In Osterling, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quick averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think?
Come on, Jake.
For some reason, I think it was quiet. I don't know. I liked something. Not too sure.
Okay, so it lacked. I think it was a little too breathy, personally.
I get that sometimes.
I will say I was with you in terms of believability until you had your stumble and reset for you wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. Everything after that, your pace quickened a little bit, and a lot of the to use Nathan's word, the gravitas dropped out of your voice. I feel like you had a stronger acting choice through the first paragraph than you did in the second one.
I think that's just you, Jake.
It very
No, I'm
well
just
could
kidding.
be, Russ.
I'm just
It
kidding.
very well could be. Like many things on here, it's just me.
I know, I'm just kidding. All right.
I think you did a really good job with like portraying how the narrator cares about the players. I think you did a really good job with that. I could tell, like, in your acting choices, it seemed like you cared.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's actually something fairly common I've noticed from your reads, Russ, is you do, I think you get a little bit more flustered with your mess ups than you may realize. I think you just need to give yourself a little bit more of a reset, go a little bit farther back. But generally, your acting was really close. I would say make it more full voice rather than quite as breathy. You can, and slow it down no. Your pace was good. Just more full voice. And if you do mess up, back it up a little farther than you normally would.
All right. In Osterling, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again with only quick averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. What about that read?
I liked that one better. I still think you're rushing back into things after your slips, especially with the time and again, which for you both times became time and time again. But irrespective of that, I think one of the positives was by going full voiced, you dropped back into a hush as the street urchin, as you were voicing what she was saying, and it was a more noticeable difference,
Oh,
which I
okay.
thought was really good.
Mhm.
Because she, if we're trying to embody what they're feeling, she's nervous. She's probably going to quietly be saying many people are worried. So it was more noticeable. And I thought that was definitely a positive with that second read.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think the shift in tone during the dialogue was really good. I do think that you I kind of see what everyone else was kind of mentioning. You kind of did speed up a little bit.
After the
I'd say
second-
near like around the second paragraph or so. I'd say you sped up a little bit.
Well, I also try to vary the speed a little bit too on purpose to make it not just sound the same speed the whole time. Give it a little variety.
You're moving from more of the whisper into a full voice had a really interesting effect on the very beginning of your read. It sounded almost like you were starting to read a children's book. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson. I mean, having some affectation in your voice, some modulation is good. Obviously, that's kind of what we're going for, but we want to keep it within like the horror bounds, the caution bounds. So bring the highs and the lows a little closer together, not monotone, but closer together. You don't want to go too high and you don't want to go too low.
Yeah, that's a good observation for sure. Because a lot of times when they tell me to go full voice, then it sounds different.
Yeah. There's some kind of. It's funny how sometimes we will associate different directions that we receive. Like a lot of people, when they think more energy, they usually think more strain in the voice and faster and louder and whatnot. When it could mean something totally different.
Yeah.
So that might be one of those strange associations that you made. I'm not totally sure, but in this one, with this read, just make sure that you stay within that more caution and I don't know what's going on kind of boundary.
If it helps, maybe instead of thinking full voice, just pull some of the breath out of what you were reading the first time.
Yeah,
that's a good
because
point.
your tonality was really good in your first read. It was just the texture was too breathy.
Yeah, I kind of hear that. I know.
Okay, well then go ahead and give us another read.
All right, thanks. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside and a lot of farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. How was that?
I liked your vocal placement on that one. It was much more reminiscent of your first read without the breath. You still had some breath creep in. I heard it on eyeing you from a side alley, but by and large, that was a much cleaner read. And I still think when you stumble, you pick up your pace, almost like you have a clock that you're trying to match, and when you stumble, you have to speed up to catch it.
Yep.
I would encourage you to even, like, if that's the image that's sort of haunting you there, just stop and, like, legitimately stop, let it get even further away, and then go at whatever pace works rather than trying to catch back up.
Thanks, Jake. I can tell you're a good teacher.
I hope so.
But so just so we make sure we have enough time for everybody, let's go ahead and just do the first paragraph. So just give us a reread of that first paragraph. Full voice, more condensed modulation in your voice too. Not so high, not so low.
In Osterling, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again with only quick averted eyes as a response. It does not take much sense. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. How's that reset?
Better. You gave yourself more time to actually reset. But you did say time and time again rather than time and again.
Oh. All right. Time and again. There we go.
Time and again. All right, cool. Thank you. Awesome. All right, moving along.
That was a lovely pickup.
But seriously, what did everybody think of that one?
I was happy with it. I still think you're getting a little bit breathy towards the end of that first paragraph, but I think overall that was your best read.
Do you not think that breath might be just a tool that helps it a little bit, as long as you don't overuse it?
That's what I think. I think it's creeping into. I completely agree that it can be a tool. I felt like it was becoming consistent through the last probably 2 to 2.5 sentences.
Okay.
I thought that reset was really good.
Thanks. What do you think about breathiness, Michael?
Well, I actually agree. I think breathing is just a tool that can be used in the right places, but it has to be used in the right places and the right amount.
Okay.
Actually, it's much like the syrup we were talking about earlier. You can use syrup here or there in very small amounts, particularly if you mean to be sarcastic. But it needs to be used in very particular ways. I do agree that maybe it was used a little too much towards the end, but it was still, again, I still think it's a really positive, really strong read you had.
All right, thanks.
Okay, well, I mean, if you haven't heard me talk enough, now it's my turn. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting time and again, with only quick averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from an alley. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Opening it up.
Thank you, Russ.
I think you got like this pattern, like da-da-da-da, stop, da-da-da-da, stop, da-da-da-da, stop. And it's like you're putting pauses there for effect, but you're overusing them.
I don't even know that I would say you were overusing them, but I agree. You were putting them in the same places, and that gave you that kind of it started to turn into an ambient read.
Yeah.
And I won't say that it was as flat as somebody mentioned newscaster earlier, but I'd love to hear. I don't even want to say inflection because I think you were in that range where you want to stay, but I'd love to hear a little more passion in the storytelling, if that makes sense. Just a little more insight, again, a little more of a cocked eyebrow, a little more of a what do you think's going on? Like in the back of your mind almost.
And when you said it is worse in the countryside, you chose countryside. I think the word is worse as the
Okay.
if you're going to hit one. And then that time and again, I think that might be one of the places you're saying the comma might be messed up. But to me, it says you raised your arm and called out a friendly greeting, right? And then time and again, you got these responses. You didn't call out your greeting time and again. And the way you read it, I think you're saying you're calling out your greeting time and again.
I think that's one where
Go either
it
way.
works either way. Like the way you chose it, it worked the way that you read it, Russ. The way that Michael chose it, I think it works. It was just a part of the read that didn't work as well.
But for where they put the comma, I think that's what they're asking for, kind of. And if you read it wrong as to their intention, then they're going to go to the next person.
I think that's a risk, is what I would say, because I do feel like you're still having to raise your arm and call out time and again in order to get multiple responses, quickly averted eyes. So I think it works either way, but it's sorry, Michael, I guess the bear of it is you just have to do it again, but better.
All right, that's come back to haunt me. Okay. All right, let's see if I can do it better. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quick averted eye. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out." So was that better?
It was better. When you said in Osterlink, it was definitely a question.
Okay, so I asked in Ostelink.
Yeah, and then the inn is completely sold out.
Yeah, wasn't crazy about that last
Weird
one.
about that. I can't remember what it was.
Okay.
The biggest thing was it was matter of fact. It was as if you're reading as the character, the urchin, but it was still very matter of fact. Like, for her to point that out, number one, it's letting the players know, well, you're not staying there tonight, but it's very unusual. And so you almost need a little more awe or surprise or some aspect of that in your voice. I would also say, based on your read this time, I'd love for you to put a comma after the word deserted in that first sentence. And if not a comma, at least give me an extra space, an extra breath.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. And for the sake of time, which should I just? Well, this will be my last take. So whether I get it or not, oh well. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out." Okay, as my last read, how was that?
Second paragraph was much better than the first. Like when you started, I don't even know if you saw me, but I was like, "Whoa, slow down, slow down." You leapt into it, had pauses in good places, but you kind of dove into it. But I don't know if you noticed it or just the copy made you, but you slowed it down as you worked into that second paragraph, and that second paragraph was fantastic for me, at least.
Yeah.
I thought it was all pretty good. But that last line you said, the inn is completely sold out, like that. It almost sounds like a question.
Yeah.
I know what you're going for, but I don't think you're quite getting it. You know, I know you're going for like a mystery type feel, but or something like that.
I'm with Jake. I think the second paragraph was amazing.
Okay, but then probably a little something weird about the completely sold out. I'd probably have to retake later on. Okay. Well, anyway,
I was
again,
okay with
interest
the
of time.
first one. I thought the first one was good too myself, but I don't know what they didn't like about it.
Well, that's why we have a ton of different views, because you never know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Rob, you're up. Go for it. Rob, I wonder if you're giving us the greatest read in the world and we
I
just
think
can't
we're having a Richard read.
hear it, but you're muted.
Definitely too quiet. Bring up the volume.
Yeah.
Can't hear you, Peach.
Just talking in a language incomprehensible to us mortals.
Yeah, you brought up Lovecraftian, and now he's ascended. Rob, are you there? Okay, well, for now we'll go ahead and move on until he gets back. Hatim, you're up.
Ooh, okay. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her, When you ask her about the town, and why everyone seemed afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into the town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. What did we think?
I think the pauses are killing him.
Yep. I think you were trying to help the writer out, and I don't know that the writer needed that much help. Whereas one of the things that I'll say is we've talked to a couple of people about slowing down, but that doesn't necessarily mean increasing the pauses and therefore segmenting the sentences. It means slowing down the delivery of the words in the sentence. Because I think you had a couple of places where, you know, it became very staccato in your read.
Mm.
Yeah, you almost need to read it without any pauses at all to get rid of some of that because it was so pausy.
I really think your voice fits this sort of thing. I will say I do think the pauses kind of distracted from that.
I think also like I kept messing up, so probably that also took away from it.
Not necessarily. Here's the thing: we're very used to people resetting. That wasn't the issue. My issue started from the very beginning, before you ever had a slip up, and it was very segmented and broken up. I agree with Kyle. I think the sound and tonality of your voice definitely fits this, but greatest voice in the world with either the wrong acting choices or committing to something that, you know, or not committing to something, greatest voice in the world isn't going to change that. And I think you took a lot of what we have been saying to other people and said, okay, I'll give you slow, and went too far the wrong way.
Yeah,
can you just read us the first sentence, since it happened right off the bat, and then we can tell you if you've gotten rid of it and not have to, you know, go through the whole thing. Maybe
there you go.
And help you quicker.
Alrighty, I'll do it. In Osterlink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond. How's that? No, still pausing.
Very pausy.
So I have a question, and it's the same as with Mondo and Kyle. What is your background and experience in voiceover?
I started voice acting a long time ago, but I quit. I was doing like comic dubs and stuff back in high school. Now I'm like 23. And I've been dabbling back again with like just making like stupid memes with like video games impressions and stuff. Now here I am.
Okay, no problem. So you've had some experience. Again, have you received a lot of feedback and critique on any of your work before?
Not really directly, like as a live session, like right now. It was just like, oh, I sent in my take and then like, oh, change that. Okay.
Because
do you mind if I interrupt, Michael?
Go for it.
Hatim, what's your acting background? Did you do much stage plays, improv, anything along those lines?
Never actually.
Okay.
Just only comic dubs and stuff. If that counts, I guess.
As a voice actor, you're an actor
much.
first.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sort of
so
like
if you dive, so go ahead.
So sort of like being a truck driver. You can't being a truck driver without first being a driver.
All right.
So you see, because the funny thing is we've got now a completely different sound out of you that I would have preferred to have heard this entire time. So I can tell that you do get a lot of compliments on the sound and texture of your voice, because that's immediately what you go into when you do this narration. You immediately turned into narrator Hatim. You immediately turned into this turn it down and get into this different sound. That's not really natural, and it's cut your performance up quite a bit. What we want to hear is you telling us about this world. That's the main crux of this whole thing. That's why we decided to go through and talk about all the different individual parts, is because it's not necessarily about the richness and the quality of your voice. It's about how well you can communicate what you're trying to tell people. And this is definitely narration is the again the purest distillation of that specifically. So let's try something.
All right.
Pattern break.
And
So
how would that work?
So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what a pattern break is, what we do is when we've noticed that somebody gets stuck in a particular read, or when we want them to break out of it, we do what we call a pattern break. So what you do is you go through the script, but in a character that is very uncomfortable for you and very extreme. So I hope you can make a little bit of noise where you are, or do a little bit of something, because we're going to have you deliver this as somebody completely different than what it's asking for. And I'm
Gotta be a
thinking
fast
drill.
talker.
Oh boy.
I'm
Gotta be a
thinking
fast
drill
talker.
sergeant.
I would have said
Oh,
Valley
boy,
Girl, but
okay.
either way.
Drill sergeant, just some extreme, hard-nosed drill sergeant, knife hand the entire time and everything. Get
All right.
into it. You are a drill sergeant trying to drill this into somebody's head. What's going on? And just go for it. Balls to the wall, all out. Go for it now.
All right. Just a note. It's 3 a.m. over here where I am, so
Okay, well,
I'll
then
try
keep
to
it down
be
as
as-
you will, but try to get
project.
your mind into that character.
all right.
In Ostalink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in an alley. The villagers, you see, scurrying.
Come on, keep going. Faster, faster. Pick it up. Pick up the pace.
The villagers, you see, scurrying on.
Doesn't matter if you
The
mess up.
villagers,
Just
you
go.
see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and time again, with only quickly averted eye. Sorry.
Even if you stumble, keep going. Don't reset. Just full steam ahead.
With only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong.
Whew, man. Can I get some water? Actually, it's good.
Go ahead, take a quick drink, but you're not done. You still have a
Yep.
full
Oh, man.
paragraph you need to go through.
And remember,
Well,
this is
full
more
send.
about this is less about shouty and more about pace,
Mhm.
right? You are
All right.
chewing this guy out and you have 700 things to say and 14 seconds to say them in.
All right.
And don't forget the knife hand. All
right.
fingers together, right in the face. Go for it.
All right.
You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she says,
My God.
you wave her over and he hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and where everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, many people are worried because the strange things are happening. It seems worse in the countryside, and a lot of farm folks.
Slow it down, shit.
No,
And
it
a lot-
doesn't matter. Just go. Full send. Full send.
A lot of the farm folks have come into town. The inn is completely sold out.
Okay. Do you feel uncomfortable?
Yes.
Perfect. That's exactly where we want you to be. Now, get back into just the read itself. So just look at the words and go for it. Tell us about what's happening. Take a drink if you have to. Don't overthink it. Don't do a bunch of preparing. Just dive into it.
Okay. In Ostalink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond asleep in an alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from the side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her. It seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out.
So first of all, I have to apologize if we got you in trouble. We did hear some stuff in the just a little bit in the background. I really hope you're okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. But here's the thing. So you sort of slipped back into it a little bit towards the very end, which is, I think, where a lot of the stopping and starting sort of really kicked up. But at the very beginning, your read was different. It was a different pace. It was a different feel, and it was a different focus that you had. So it broke you out of that, at least for a little while. That's why we do a pattern break. At least I noticed that. I don't. Did anybody else hear the same thing?
I was going to say the exact same thing. For those of you that have never been on here before, or have never watched somebody go through a pattern break, that's why, because they work. Because that your first paragraph was light years more believable. It may not have had that really great sound, but it was so much more convincing and authentic than anything you had done leading up to that. I do think Michael's right. I think the stumbles and the stopping and starting is what got you back into your pauses. And it seemed like by the end, and it may have just been you already shouted your voice out. By the time you got to the farm folk and the inn is completely sold out, you kind of just went, okay, I'm at the end. Let me get out of here. But definitely the first paragraph and the first part of the second was much better.
I just completely agree with that. The delivery was just so much more believable. It was really on point. I really like that.
Yeah, we may have gotten you in trouble, and again, I'm really sorry for that. I
It's all right. It's just my little brother just came in and is like, "Oh, have you finished?" Because I was auditioning a few hours ago.
Okay. So I just no, you mentioned it was 3 a.m. I really didn't want to get you in trouble.
It's okay.
Again, though, what we want to avoid is what I like to call the VO voice. It's where it's that sort of switch that flips in your brain that when you start reading, you suddenly do something really, really different and unnatural with your voice. And I did that for a really long time. In fact, it took me almost a year of training with Nancy Wolfson to get that out of me. So that's something that I'm really cautious about when it comes to other people as well. And I heard little inklings of that, at least at the very beginning. But the pattern break helped you pull out of that. It changed your mindset, at least for that first paragraph. And that was spot on where you needed to be. Like spot on where you needed to be. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on, shall we? As soon as he's set back up, it is Nathan's turn.
I will also say, Hatim, I don't know if you saw what I put in the chat box, but it sounded like you were getting into your Don LaFontaine in a world where you speak like this. And the thing to remember is Don talked about the fact like he didn't even speak like that normally. It's not like you walk into a restaurant and say, "Good morning, I'd like some peas for an appetizer," right? So don't let that pull of having a great natural set of pipes take you out of the mindset.
Okay, I'm set back up. I had to check on something with the other recording.
Okay.
There.
Well, whenever you're ready, Nathan.
Still going because I saw some notification from Zoom about what was going on my other computer. So,
whenever you're ready, go for it.
Okay. In Austin Link, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson. In Austin Link, The streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, opening it up. What did everybody think?
I liked most of what you were doing. I thought the initial reset when you restarted was definitely a good choice. But I will say that something is wrong added way too much syrup to it. It reminded me of like I missed your read of the first sentence of the next paragraph because that stuck out in my head so wrong. It reminded me of a book where they were trying to like they didn't do 3 sentences in a row. They did them one after another as their own paragraphs. The fear, the pain, the blood.
Excuse me.
Don't help the writer out quite so much.
Okay. Okay. All right. I just about Shatnered that, didn't I? Yeah, no Dan rule there, but
That was a Dan
That
rule
was
violation.
absolutely a Dan rule.
That was
Thank you very much.
100% a Dan rule violation.
Oh,
Um,
good. I did it. Okay.
Yeah, we want to bring down that hyper drama. Like, yes, some melodrama is okay, but you're trying to set a stage and
Okay.
walk people through that stage, not light the stage and decorate the stage and be every actor on the stage. You know,
This
there's
is not
only
an
so
anime.
much setting up that you could do. Exactly.
Although most of the time I am every actor on the stage, but hey, that's my own show.
I was getting ready to say you're just describing his element there, Michael.
Yeah, I know, but and that's the thing. That's why I love challenging you specifically, Nathan, because I know you can handle these.
Okay. In Austin Lake, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay. What did everybody think of that one? Opening it up. Anybody at all?
I'll go first again. I feel like you took the melodrama out of the places it didn't need to be, and that
Okay.
made it a much cleaner read. But that also meant that you lost a little something from the street urchin.
Okay.
Like I wasn't crazy about the inn is completely sold out in your first read, but everything else, especially the way you started, she didn't just look nervous, she sounded nervous, and that was great. And in this time, she sounded like you were narrating her.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think you took the melodrama out, but I think you also took out a little bit of the darkness of this piece.
Okay. All right then. In Austin Link, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional
I'm
townsperson.
gonna go ahead and stop you right there.
Okay.
You've done this every single time. There is no N, or there is no second N in Ostelink. There's only one at the very end. You keep saying Austin Link.
Ah,
Ostelink.
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 Or
So it's an
Ostelink.
OH. Either one.
Yes, Ostelink.
All right. Quick adjustment. Oh. Okay. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out.
Okay. What did everybody think of that one? I, for one, think it was probably your most solid so far.
Agreed.
It's definitely your most solid read so far. I think you're starting to move a little bit more into the breathy.
Yeah.
A more breathy read than probably would normally fit with this kind of read. And it's a little bit out of character for you as well. You don't normally like get into breathy. I'm thinking you may need to shift your character a little bit because you're focusing a little bit too much on mystery and dark. I think you need to be more of the curious party member. So you're like in the party with them and you're chronicling what's going on with them and you're seeing all of this happening with them and you're just as curious as they are as to what's going on. Because again, this is towards the very beginning of this adventure, according to the directions. So not a whole lot's happened.
Okay. I would pick that back up, but it's 8:52. So when we've got Vincent
we're getting
and Muhammad still. So
and Jake. Don't forget Jake.
Jake.
Jake still exists.
Sadly, some days.
But
I got ahead of
anyway,
myself.
I would say that that's probably your most solid read so far.
Okay.
So anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Jake,
Okay.
you're up.
In Ostelink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Okay, how was that?
That was really good. I think you really captured the Lovecraftian aspect of this. The only thing
Come
I
on,
would
Russ. Russ, hit me. Come on.
I liked it a lot. It was really good. It might have been just maybe a little flat over, I mean, but not much at all. Just, I think you could have added in a little more color here and there to make it more fun.
Yeah. Sorry, Kyle, you actually had some feedback you were going to give him?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think you went as you did a really good job with the Lovecraftian bit. I think a bit of that seeped into your own voice, and the coldness of the piece kind of went into your voice. And while that was good for the describing the setting, I think you struggled a little bit with showing that you cared about the players.
Yeah, you had this slight little journey in that read where at the very beginning, I felt you were like part of the party, and then you sort of slowly kept detaching and moving away. So why don't you go ahead and give us one more quick read?
Okay. In Ostelink, the streets are deserted, with the exception of an occasional townsperson hurrying home, or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. The few villagers you see, scurrying on their way, pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting, time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from a side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. It seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over and she hesitantly approaches. When you ask her about the town and why everyone seems afraid, she looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come into town. The inn is completely sold out."
Much more solid read that time, much more connected in general. That was definitely your best so far with this particular script.
Your tone had an almost Twilight Zone feel to it. It fit this, but it did. It just like felt like classic Twilight Zone.
That would be Rod Serling, I believe.
Yeah,
Jake,
just a little
Never
bit of
done that
Serling.
before.
Jake,
Nicely
have you
done.
played Dungeons and Dragons before?
You're joking, right? I think I brought it up on here before. Yes, I've played, I've DM'd, I've watched. Yeah,
Well,
I was playing Dungeons and Dragons before most of the people that are on this call at the moment were born. Not all,
we won't
but
go
not
that
all,
far.
but most.
You're not that old, Jake. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
No, I was playing. I was there during the Satanic Panic of the '80s. So
Yeah, I remember sneaking a few games of Dungeons and Dragons at the Baptist school I went to with the principal's son.
now, see,
man.
that is more punk that I could hope to aspire to. That's fantastic.
We're in the back of band class rolling the 20-sided dice.
So the thing is you dipped into the DM read and it worked out very well. I think that particular
missing?
experience that you had made it work right there. The DM read was what you needed to do.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
good on you.
Like to
All right.
Nice.
I really liked the voice at the end, and yeah, I definitely agree. It's definitely the very effective DM read.
Mhm.
The little accent you put on the voice is a very nice touch to it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I decided
maintained the
not to go-
characterization, so that worked.
I decided not to go the whole way like I did in the cold read because I took what you said to heart, and my RP is good, but it's not flawless.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on while we still have just a little bit of time. Vincent, you're up.
Okay. In Austerlink, the streets are deserted with the exception of. Hold on one second. Okay. In Austerlin, the streets are deserted with the exception of a occasional townsperson hurrying home or a drunk vagabond asleep in the alley. The few villagers you see scurrying on their way pause only to regard you with cautious stares. You raise your arm and call out a friendly greeting time and again, with only quickly averted eyes as a response. It does not take much to sense that something is wrong. You catch sight of a street urchin eyeing you from the side alley. Unlike the rest, it seems her curiosity is winning over her caution. You wave her over, and she hesitantly approaches. You ask her about the town, why everyone seems afraid. She looks nervous and says, "Many people are worried because of the strange things that are happening. It is worse in the countryside, and a lot of the farm folk have come to empty town. The inn is completely sold out."
So one thing that I noticed that I really liked about the read was when it came to the street urchin, you actually gave it just a slight change to your voice, not like a full-on character, but just enough to denote that it was a different person speaking. That really worked out. Your reads are still a little bit choppy, and I think that's something that you're practicing, that you're working on. But this one was probably the least choppy of your first reads that you've had with us in a very, very long time. So whatever practicing that you're doing is really, really helping out. It's really working for you. Did Chuck mention anything about your choppy reads at all in the past? Has he talked about that with you before?
Yeah, just take your time. Take your time and breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe in, like massage your mouth and everything.
I think one of the things that was pretty clear, I heard a little what was going on in the background through the mic, and it was clear. I mean, obviously this is your cold read because you weren't here earlier for cold reads, but it was very clear that you were distracted through parts of the read, and because of that, it sounded just more like you were reading the words for the first time rather than being in the headspace of a narrator.
Yeah, and we did speak about exactly what that headspace was a little earlier in the discussion portion. So that's definitely something I always encourage you to try to make it for, because it makes getting into these reads much easier to direct. But all in all, again, I would still encourage you to, particularly with these longer scripts, take these longer scripts and practice them, because those are really going to help you smooth out your reads a bit more. If you can get through these without, as much stopping and starting, then, the shorter reads are just going to come much, much, much easier for you along the way.
Don't worry, I save all these scripts on my phone.
Good. I really hope you do, because these are great to practice with. And I would encourage everybody, whenever you are practicing, that you go ahead and record yourself and play it back. Do your own little mini mic check with yourself. When you're behind the microphone and you are performing, focus on your performance. But when you listen back to the recording that you did, you are the director. Change what you've done. Make things different, change things up here or there. So, and that's only going to help strengthen your read. That's only going to help strengthen your reads. Now, that's for everybody, regardless of your experience level. So, what was that?
I believe it. I started coaching with Huber and possibly like at end of February. I think it's been like about 5.5 months now, or going on 5 or 6 months now. At the end of February, I started work. Well,
it's a little over 4 months then, if that's the case. 4 months. Close to 5.
4 months.
Yeah, you're just starting with the training anyways. Believe me, a lot of people don't really start getting a whole lot out of it until at least like 7 or 8 months into solid regular training. Like, it needs to be a regular part of your of your voiceover career to have training and to get into that in order to really get a whole lot out of it. So like, again, I went through, like, when I initially got into voiceover, I was in a training course for that took me like a year to get through, I think it was. And then when I went back and got retrained with Nancy Wolfson, that was like another year of training solid, basically. So it was, you know, a lot of consecutive training going on.
Yeah. If it helps, Vincent, I started training in 2016. I'm still training. It's 2021. Never stop learning.
Yeah, you never, ever, ever stop learning.
I'm sorry, I was away for just a moment.
No worries.
Can you repeat that last part? What that which everyone should be doing?
Training.
Oh, training.
Finding a coach. Yes, finding a coach.
Yeah,
and getting that feedback and getting, you know, having a regular training schedule.
A reputable coach.
Yes, a reputable.
Yes.
There are a lot of people out there that are happy to take your money and say, hey, come work with us for a weekend and get a demo. Run screaming from those people.
Yeah.
Right. You want someone who, number one, it can show you how they have consistently helped people, and also how they have consistently continued to work in voiceover themselves, if possible, so that they're not just, because as a high school teacher, I can tell you, as much as I hate the phrase anyone can teach, anyone can say they're a teacher.
Yep.
You want somebody who walks the walk. But I would also, you know, the other places you can look, you know, we've all talked, Michael's worked with Nancy Wolfson. We've brought we've had some coaches on here. I've worked with Gabby Nistico, and Ganguza's great. Chuck Huber is another one who's fantastic. But even just looking places like Crispin Freeman's Voice Acting Mastery podcast, and D. Bradley Baker's I Want to Be a Voice Actor website, and I think Yuri Lowenthal and Tara Platt's book, Voiceover Voice Actor. Rob's got another good one. Mark Cashman is a fantastic coach. So just making sure that you never stop training, because the moment you do, somebody else is out there trying to get better in order to take those jobs.
Yeah. This is your opportunity here. The mic check is your opportunity to take what you've learned in training and apply it. That's the main point of this. We're not here to try to train you to be a voice actor. We're here to give you a space to work the skills you've learned as a voice actor.
Is it when you're working with a coach, is it normal to be like doing weeklies for months?
Yeah. Like I said, I did when I worked with Nancy Wolfson. I was a little bit of a humble brag here, if I may. When I started working with Nancy Wolfson, when she first heard the demo that I had produced, she immediately added me to her casting list. So while I was training with her, she included me into her casting list. So I was already auditioning while going through training. She mentioned to me that she does that for a small fraction of the people who come to her, because she feels that it really does require a certain amount of skill and ability to start working on those particular auditions. I still worked with her weekly for a little over a year. Consistently.
So how much did you end up paying?
I paid her, it was per session. Sometimes I had multiple sessions, sometimes not. It really did vary. And I know her price has changed, but for her specifically, I believe it was 106 or 7 or something like that per session with her.
Okay.
For an alternative, when I worked with Gabby, it was it's 150 per session. We did it once a month, and she was available. She would have me do homework and record it and send it to her in time in between. So, I know a lot of times LA people can be a little bit more expensive. I think Ann Ganguza is closer to 180, but the biggest thing is to find someone that you are comfortable with. A lot of coaches will have a 15-minute consult, because they could be the greatest coach in the world and clash with you or your personality, and it's not going to help you at all. So I would say focus on finding the right person first, and then, figuring out your schedule and how you're going to work with them.
So on the coaching part, you can expect to spend thousands in a year.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can. Mhm.
Yeah.
Specifically because if you spend that money in the right place, it'll pay you back. Again, while I worked with Nancy Wolfson, I landed several jobs doing product walkarounds for automobile companies. So I've done work for Mazda, Toyota, Yamaha. Yamaha, I did the sports bike line. Mercedes-Benz, Smart, most of the major car companies I've done some kind of work for. And all of that paid back basically everything that I put into it. So if you're working with the right coach, yes, you are going to be paying in some money, but if they're worth what you're paying them, you're going to get much more out of it.
Yeah.
I will also
So-
go back in and mention what I said to somebody else.
So
If you haven't taken any acting classes, that may be a little bit less expensive and more bang for your buck, because learning mic technique is great, but if you're acting, because again, people will say, well, anyone can act, and that's
Yeah,
not
no.
necessarily true. So understand, taking acting classes, improv is amazing.
yes.
But
Yes.
and again, this is not just for you, it's for anybody that's looking to get into this. I would, unless you have a strong acting background already, I would look at acting classes even before finding a coach.
Yeah, definitely. But unfortunately, we are almost 15 minutes over. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm sorry, we're not going to do any extra reads now, but we are going to go ahead and end the recorded portion of the mic check. That does not mean that the hangout is over. So afterwards, we can go ahead and talk freely. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed your time with us. You know what to do down below. There's all the links and the stuff down there. And we'll see you all next week. Take it easy, everybody. Join us every Monday for free script practice. You can also find the mic check on Facebook and Twitter. If you liked what you saw, then subscribe for more.